good. This is an important one because
Absolutely.
on that fateful day, that wonderful day when somebody says, I want to buy that house, you want to be ready. You want to know what you're doing, right?
Absolutely. I was at an open house and somebody said, I want to put an offer in. I didn't know what to do.
That's when you start sweating profusely and thinking, who can I call fast, right?
You could say that, yes. I got a hold of Al. Hal helped me out.
Okay, good, good. So I see Everett is on the call. Everett is one of our mortgage lenders that we work with. He works for a company called Bond Street, and he is going to give a brief, Everett.
As always, as always.
He knows me. I don't let him talk much. But Everett, after you talk, put your name and your company and your phone number in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And then people will know how to contact you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so like Sally was saying, my name is Everett. I work with Bond Street Mortgage. We're one of the in-house partners for the Bergen County group. Nice to meet you all. There's a couple of you guys that I haven't had the chance to meet yet. The biggest thing that's going on that you guys are probably seeing, especially if you guys are newer agents, is that when you have buyers looking to make offers on houses, the property is usually having multiple offers and it's going over ask. So a couple of things to just keep in mind when you're working with buyers is, number one, you want to make sure that they have a real pre-approval. So generally when they're talking to like the big banks, for example, it's just a pre-qualification because they're most likely not reviewing personal docs. I would say 50-50 if they're even pulling credit and all that kind of good stuff. Whereas if they talk to somebody like us, we're doing a true pre-approval. So we're pulling credit, reviewing personal docs, tax returns, W-2s, pay stubs to ensure that they're qualified and that, at least on the finance side, there's not going to be any issues that get to the closing table. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, with these offers going over ask and then a lot of times going 50, 60, 70,000 over ask, I would say we have to be on the same page because I would say we have to get comps, because if the appraiser underappraises it as to whatever the purchase price is, with us, they'll give us the opportunity to contest it and to show comps that justify that price, whether it's because there's a bidding war, a couple of houses down the street or whatever. Whereas with the big banks, once they do that appraisal, it's finalized. There's no contesting it. So those are just two of the things, especially in this market, what we've been seeing, especially on the buy side, and this being a buy class, just to definitely keep in the back of your mind, because I would say those are two huge things, to be honest with you right now. And before I let go and turn it back over to Sally, does anyone have any mortgage related questions or anything about any deals that they're working on, or just general questions?
In general, thank you for that. What's the timeline? How long does it take to go through the process?
To get pre-approved or to close?
To get pre-approved.
To get pre-approved, I mean, I can do it legitimately within an hour if it's a clean deal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if they are on top of things and they get me to personal docs ASAP, I can legitimately pre-approve somebody within an hour. I always tell, because I always under promise and over deliver, so I always tell people, give me about like 42 to 42 to 48 to 72 hours, and then hopefully I get back a lot sooner than that.
Got it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And he said something very important. A lot is dependent on the buyer being forthcoming about providing their documents. So if you start working with a buyer, you might want to prepare them and say, you know, why don't you think about getting pre-approved right now before we even find a house? Because anyway, you want them to be pre-approved before you start looking, so that you know the houses you're showing them are really important for their price range. So that's big. And then the other thing is, once you have the pre-approval, let's say they were pre-approved for $500,000, but Everett has told them, I'm approving you for $500,000, but actually you could be approved for a little more than that. Now you get in a bidding war, and they're going to pay over that amount. Just know that one of the beauties of working with Everett or one of our other mortgage partners is that they're available to you during the week, weeknights, and on the weekends, that you can just call and say, you know what, the pre-approval is for 500. They're going to need a mortgage of 520. Can you just quickly redo their mortgage pre-approval? And they'll do it for you. So
Yeah,
that's
like-
another night.
Yeah, like Sally said, we try to make ourselves available as close to 24/7 as possible. Unfortunately, I do have to have somewhat of a life. So if I can't do it right there and then, the one good thing is that we work together as a team here at Bond Street. So I can call, text one of my colleagues and say, hey, can you write a new pre-approval for Joe Smith at that $550 purchase price with 20% down? And then whoever's available, they'll jump on it, because I would do the same if I was home and had to do that for one of them.
Okay.
Everett,
All right.
question. Can you put a list of all the documents that you need right away?
Yeah,
Because
I'll put that in the chat.
where I was missing like 1 or 2 documents.
Mhm.
So if we knew everything we needed, we can get that when we
Yeah.
sign the buyer agreement. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll put that in the chat for you guys.
Thank you.
And just keep in mind, if you're working with someone who is self-employed, it will take a little longer. It's a little longer process.
Yeah, especially in today's
So-
world where it's a lot of it is dependent on the COVID and how their business has been doing. So not in
Yeah.
addition to the tax returns, we need a P&L, a profit and loss statement. And that's something new that we have to get up front just to ensure that their business is still up and running and close to what they've been making for the past 2 years.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Everett.
Absolutely.
Make sure you put that info in the chat.
Will do.
I'm just going to
Thank
take
you.
a
I have
one.
picture of everybody.
Do you have time for one more
Smile,
question?
everybody.
Yeah, if Sally allows it.
Do you have time for one more?
If it's quick, only
If it's quick.
because
All right,
we have
well,
a lot
next
to
time.
do with contracts.
That's
Well,
okay.
I'll put
Catch
my
you.
cell phone. You can call me after.
Thank you.
You got it.
Okay. So what are we here to talk about? What's our
Writing
topic for
contracts.
today?
Contract.
Writing contracts. Okay. So there's a couple of things we're going to go into. I'm going to be sharing my screen with you, but there's a few things that if someone says to you, I want to write a contract, I want to buy that house, that you need to be doing kind of to get prepared to write up the contract. So there's a few items that you want to gather and kind of have at your fingertips. So the first one is what Everett just talked about. You want to make sure that they have a pre-approval from a mortgage company. And that's key, because virtually every listing agent will require that when you submit your contract, you also submit a buyer pre-approval. So that's a given. The second thing that you want to do before you start writing up the contract is that you want to either print out or have up on your computer the listing, a copy of the listing that they're going to purchase or that they want to purchase, along with the tax record that goes with it and the history. So I'm going to show you, I picked out a house for us to make an offer on today. So, hold on, I have to share my screen, I forgot. Hang on. Okay, share screen. Okay. So we're going to make an offer on this listing. It's $999,000, and it's over in Tenafly. So this is the listing that you would pull up so you can look at it, because there's a couple things you need to discuss with your potential buyers. Things like, how soon do they want to be in the house? Well, in order to help make that decision, you can look on the listing under here where it says possession, and you notice that it says possession 0 to 30 days. So these people are obviously in a hurry to sell. And so you can advise your buyers, not that they have to close in that time. In fact, unless they're paying cash, it would be almost impossible for them to close that quickly. But it's something to keep in mind. If your buyers can can close sooner rather than later, that's going to make their contract more appealing. So that's one thing. You want to have a copy of this. Also, the contract is going to ask you to write in the block, which is up here, and the lot, which is up here. So this is giving you some information that you potentially are going to need to put onto the contract. And if you want to look at the tax information a little further, you hit this little letter T, and that will bring up the tax record, which also gives you other information about the house. And you can also bring up the history of the house. And when I say history, it's real estate history. So you would see, well, this house started out being listed at $1,050,000, and now they just reduced it on October 7th to $999,000. So now you know that they recently reduced it, which in their minds, they just lost $50,000, right, or $51,000. So usually you can, if you see that there's been a very recent price reduction, you know that they, unless they're really desperate to sell, which maybe these people are because they said 0 to 30 days, they might not be as open to a further reduction as someone who's been sitting at the same price for months. So those are all factors for you to, to be advising your client. The other thing that's important is, see this letter D here by the listing. That stands for Associated Documents. So we're going to click on that, and we can see that the COVID waiver is in here. So if your buyers have not already signed the COVID waiver for this house, you're going to have them sign the COVID waiver. And this is the one that the seller has also signed. So then you're going to ask your buyers to sign in the buyer section. I was hoping to also see in here a lead paint form. But since there is not one in there, you really need to call the listing agent. It happens to be Kathy from our office. And you would say to her, Kathy, I'm calling you about 46 Country Club Road. I'm wondering if you will please send me the lead paint disclosure and the seller disclosure. Now, the lead paint disclosure is a required document. The seller disclosure is not. It's highly suggested. So, but if she doesn't have a seller disclosure, there's nothing you can do about that. But she should have a lead paint document because this house was built in the 50s originally. So there's bound to be, the need for a lead paint form. So now you've gathered, you have a printout of the MLS with the tax record, you have your pre-approval, and you've requested the lead paint form and the seller disclosure form. So now you're ready to start working on actually doing the paperwork. So we're going to go over to dotloop, and you're going to click on Add Loop. So we're going to add the loop, and it's going to ask us for the property address, which of course, I know it's Country Club Road, but
Sally, we're doing docu. I thought DocuSigns is like.
We're not doing our contracts in DocuSign yet. At least not in Ridgewood. I think maybe, are you in Wycliffe Lake?
No, in Rutherford.
Okay, I don't know what they're doing in your market center, but in
We're
Ridgewood,
not using at all. We're using DocuSigns only.
You're only using DocuSign?
Yes.
Is that what you said? Okay, well, don't worry about that because really in terms of the documents, which is mostly what I'm going to be talking about, we all have to use these documents, whether you're using DocLoop or DocuSign. So you're going to you hit add a loop, and you're going to put 46 Country Club Road, Tenafly. And if you want to put the names of your buyers, we'll call them the Smiths. Well, okay. So now we have our address in there. We're going to hit continue. And then we're going to select what kind of loop are we doing. We're doing a buyer loop. So we could choose buyer loop, continue. We don't have a photo that we want to upload, so we can just click done. And now it's creating the loop for us. So it's basically giving us the documents that we need to get filled out. So we're going to hit view loop. And luckily for everyone, we have a buyer loop checklist. So this is the checklist. And I actually did, I changed this a little bit in that not all of these documents are even going to be available to you right now. So I made a document, which is this one. If you want to take a picture of this with your phone, feel free, because the items that I put an X in the box, those are the ones that you're going to need to do for your contract. These are the ones that are going to go into your loop right away. The other ones are things that will come once your loop, once your contract gets accepted. You'll start getting attorney review letters and inspection letters, and if you have a referral for these buyers, you're going to put that in there. But these things are going to come later. Okay, the things without the check boxes. But you need to get into the habit of thinking of this loop or whatever, or your DocuSign as a file cabinet, that you're going to keep all the information together for this particular transaction. So anytime you need a document for 46 Country Club, you're going to come in here and it's all going to be there for you. So now we're going to go back to .loop. And the first thing is a COVID waiver. But as you saw, there was a COVID waiver already in the listing, right? Attached to the listing in the MLS. So remind me at the end, I'll teach you how to upload something into here if you have a document that you need to add. All right, so we're going to skip down here to consumer information statement. Technically, you should have gotten this filled out in the very beginning of working with your buyers. But if for some reason you didn't, you need to do it now. So it's going to ask you to fill in the people. So to do that, we need to set up our people. And let me just go back. If we go here, hold on, and we go down to the bottom to people, we're going to add some people. So I'll just add myself. Okay, so I'm going to add myself as though I'm going to pretend I'm buying this house. And I'm going to say add person. Okay. And you can add anyone else. You can add an attorney. You can add, if there's more buyers, you can just keep adding them in this form. All right. So here, we're going to go now back to the consumer information statement. And
Does the attorney have to be added?
I'm sorry?
Does the attorney have to be added to this form? Consumer information
Doesn't
statement?
have to be, no. And you can limit the documents that different people can see. Like you
Okay,
don't,
thank you.
if you add someone, it doesn't necessarily mean they can see every document.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, okay, so here we're going to go into the signature and we're going to add the buyer, right? And so we're going to say Sally Ponchak. And we're going to add that person. Okay, so now it's going to say Sally sign here. And then you're going to type in your name. And let's just say Kathy is going to sell her own listing. So we're going to type in the listing agent's name if she's selling it herself. And it's going to, then you're going to check off when you're working with a buyer, buyer's agent and disclose dual agent if the opportunity arises. In this case, with this house, the person I would be, or Kathy would be, a dual agent because she's the listing agent. And wait, I just have to let somebody in. Okay. Because she's the listing agent, but she also has the buyer. Okay, so that's our. Did someone have a question?
Yeah, just a really quick question. If you are the listing agent on this deal and you have a buyer, do you do you put that you're a buyer's agent still with?
Well, yes, because you're saying and disclose dual agent. You're always going to check this box,
Okay.
one of these two boxes, because there's always the chance that you're going to wind up being a disclosed dual agent.
Okay, but you wouldn't put seller's agent if you were the agent.
So that I would put seller's agent if I was having my seller sign this, and buyer agent if I were having the buyer sign it, because in both cases it says and disclose dual agent. So that means you can be a seller agent and a buyer agent in either case.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so now our next form we come to is informed consent to dual agency. Again, technically, you should have this filled out and signed early in the game with your people, because even if you just show another listing from your office, you are a dual agent. So people should be giving you permission. So I really recommend that as soon as you start working with people, you have them sign the consumer information statement and the dual agency form. The CIS, or the consumer information statement, is required by the state of New Jersey to be signed. And it's supposed to be when you first start working with people. So we have it auto-filled a signature box for the buyer to sign, and then you would have them sign, and then you would be signing here. So that's our consent to dual agency. And now we go to our next form. Our next form is permission to advertise. Now that may seem like a weird form to you, but it really isn't, because if you sell this house and you want to shout to the world on Facebook that you just sold this house at 46 Country Club Lane in Tenafly, that's advertising. Just posting it on Facebook or Instagram is advertising. So you technically need the buyer's permission to do that. Okay, next form is...
Sally, if you're doing an open house for an agent who listed the property, do you also need to get special permission from the agent or from the seller to advertise that open house?
You would need to have permission from the agent. You are never, as a realtor, you are never allowed to advertise someone else's listing without their permission. You always have to have permission if you're advertising somebody else's listing.
And do you recommend getting it in writing somehow, or?
I mean, you know what? Writing is always better. But even if you just do a text message back and forth or a quick email, if it has to be verbal, it's not the end of the world, but things in writing are always optimal.
One more question. Is it acceptable to use the pictures from NJMLS to post on Facebook and advertise, or is that a no-no?
If it's somebody else's listing, you mean?
Yes, and if you have permission.
As long as they've given permission, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hugo, I
But if
usually
they
just
haven't-
ask the agent for the picture.
Yeah, a lot of times the agent will just give you the pictures to use. But if not, yes, you can, as long as they have given you permission, you can use the ones from the MLS.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sally, why
Okay.
why do we need the permission from the buyer to advertise?
Because if you're putting out there, you know, oh, congratulations to my buyers, they bought 46 Country Club Lane, and they object to that, then you could be potentially in trouble.
Okay.
So we just need their permission to do it.
Okay, great.
This form is something you will need not in the beginning, but after the contract has been accepted and you're out of attorney review and under contract, you're going to send this email to them, which is just a way to introduce them to Tim at Carnegie Home and Auto Insurance. So we can talk about that later, but that's important to know down the road. Wire payment instructions are if the attorney or the title company doing the closing wants to wire us the money. This just explains to them what they have to do in order to do that. Okay, now we come to the wet paint form. Remember, we are either finding the wet paint form in the associated documents in the MLS, or we're asking the listing agent for it. Understand that if the house was built before 1978, it's required that you have a lead paint form signed and in the file. There's actually an $11,000 fine if you don't. It's a federal law, so that's really super important. Once in a while, you're going to run into a very lazy listing agent who is going to keep telling you, no, I'll get you the lead paint, and they never do, and they never do. What you have to do in those cases is you have to keep sending emails, and you're going to put the emails into the loop so that if you're ever questioned by anyone who's checking such things, you can show evidence that you did everything in your power to get it. So that's a really important thing. Okay, now we come to the part you've been really waiting for, which is the actual contract of sale. So we're going to put our buyer as me. And you notice that what's checked here is the buyer, not the seller. This is the notice to buyer and seller. Read this notice before signing the contract. This is called Opinion 26. You learned that in your class. This is always the first page of the contract. Always, always. Now, in this case, I guess it was auto-checked that it says you're representing the buyer, not the seller. That would not be true in this case, correct? You're representing both the seller and the buyer, right? Because Kathy, in this case, would be representing the seller as the listing agent and representing the buyers. So you're going to change it to representing both the buyer and the seller. Anytime you sell a listing that is out of your own office, so if you work in Ridgewood, a listing from Ridgewood, if you work in Rutherford, another Rutherford listing, you are a dual agent and you have to disclose that. And then down here, you're going to assign this to your buyer, right? So then it'll say Sally sign here. You're going to fill in your name at the bottom because you're the person preparing this document.
I
All
have a
right,
question.
finally, yeah.
So even if it's not me who's representing both the buyer and the seller, but it's another agent from the Ridgewood office, so it would still be a dual agent?
It's still dual agency. Yes, if you're both from the same office, the listing agent and the buyer agent are both from the same office, you are both dual agents.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. So now we come, this is the actual contract. So you're going to fill in the name, right? So we're going to put okay, whose address is, whoops, someone's just coming in. I'm going to just put the office address. Okay, agrees to purchase from. Now this is why we have a copy of the listing, right? So we have to go back and we look, okay, the person's name of the owner is not listed here, but we have the tax record. So now we know that the owner is actually a corporation, and you're going to just copy this. It's a trust, and so we're going to put that name into here. And now we're going to look again and say, okay, what is her address? She must be living on the property, in the property, because her mailing address is the same as the property address. So we know she's living in the property, so we just have, I'm just going to, instead of writing it all up, you know, it would be 46 Country Club Road. Through the brokers named in this contract at the price and terms stated below the following property. So again, you're going to put the property address in here. Shown on the tax map of, in this case, Bergen County. So you're going to put whatever county it is. Oh, wait. On the tax map of Tenafly, Bergen County. So you have the name of the town and the county. And then we're going to get the block and the lot. So here's our block. Okay. Why is it not letting me copy? 00603. Okay. Is 00603. And you're going to copy it exactly as it is. And then the lot number. Okay, thank you. And then the lot number is 00006. And you might be tempted at some point to say, like, what do I need all those zeros for? But again, you are going to copy exactly what's in there. Once in a while, there's even a suffix, which means it might be 0.007 or 6. But in this case, there's no suffix. All right, so now you should have had a conversation with your buyers about what they believe the home is worth and what they're willing to offer. So, and to do that, usually you would show them comparable houses in the same town that have sold to help them decide what they want to offer. And so let's say that they really, really, really want to buy this house, and we're going to make it an easy number. They like this house so much that even though it's listed for $999,000, they're going to offer $1 million. So we're going to put $1 million in here. And in our area, we really don't do an initial deposit. We used to, but we don't anymore, so that's not applicable. But we do an additional deposit. The additional deposit is typically due within 10 days after the attorney review period ends. And the ideal amount for the additional deposit is 10% of the purchase price. Now, 10% of the purchase price in this case would be what? What's 10% of
100,000.
100,000. That's
Right.
a lot of money, right? Not everybody has $100,000 just rattling around in their pocket or their bank account. So if they say, well, I don't have 10% cash that I want to put down right now, then you can ask them, well, what do you feel comfortable putting down? And go according to that. But the purpose of the additional deposit is to actually tie the buyers to this transaction. In other words, if they just offered $1 million and didn't put any money down, it's easy to just walk away because they have nothing to lose. But if they've put down money, they're less likely to just walk away from it. So let's go for the ideal, and we're going to say they're going to put down the full 10%. So they're putting down $100,000. And now you're going to ask them, is there more money that you want to put down as cash on this house? How much more money can you afford to put down? Again, the ideal for what someone can put down is 20%. And the reason for that is that if you put down at least 20%, you don't have to pay private mortgage insurance. So ideally, that would be what would happen. And the rest of the cash they would be putting down would go here in balance of purchase price. So let's say it's the ideal, and they say, yeah, I can put down another $100,000 so that I'm putting down 20%. I won't have to pay the private mortgage insurance on my mortgage. What would their mortgage amount be?
800,000.
800,000, right. One little tip I'll give you is once you fill these numbers in, always add it up and just make sure it comes to the right total.
It's not like Excel, huh?
No, it's not like Excel. So it relies on a little bit of brain power on your part. And sometimes the numbers can be, I'm doing real easy numbers just for the sake of this demonstration, but sometimes the numbers can be a little trickier. So just make sure you pay attention to that. This is a contract, and, obviously it's a big investment for your buyers. It's very important. So you notice at the bottom, and you're going to see this on each page, there's a place for the buyer to initial. So when you have the contract written up and send it or sit with the buyer as they are signing it, you have to make sure they initial on each page. Okay, so now we come to manner of payment. We're at line 51, paragraph 3. Whoops. Manner of payment. Remember that we did not do an initial deposit, so this first part, part A, doesn't apply to us because there is no initial deposit. The additional deposit, though, in here, we need to fill in either a date, or if we leave it blank, then it's within 10 calendar days after the fully signed contract has been delivered to both the buyer and the seller. So that's really your choice and the buyer's choice as to when they're going to come up with that chunk of money that we call the additional deposit. Paragraph C, escrow, all initial and additional deposit monies paid by the buyer will be held in escrow in the non-interest bearing account of, and in this you're always going to write the the seller's attorney. It is the custom in our area that deposit monies are held by the seller's attorney. Chances are very good that you're not going to know the name of the seller's attorney when you're just starting to negotiate a contract. So you're going to write in exactly that, seller's attorney. And then paragraph D is only comes into play if they're getting a mortgage, which, you know, most people are. But if they're getting a mortgage, you're going to write in the principal amount. So in this case, it was $800,000. And you're going to, if you know the type of mortgage, you're going to check that off. So we're going to say they're getting a conventional mortgage. I don't know why this isn't letting me fill that in, but you would click off whichever box it is. And if you know the term of the mortgage, you're going to fill that in here, whether it's a 30-year mortgage, 20-year mortgage, 15, whatever. The written mortgage commitment must be delivered to, and I'm in line 78, the written mortgage commitment must be delivered to the seller's agent, who is the listing broker identified in section 30, and the seller's attorney no later than, and if you click on this little calendar, it'll give you dates. Now, in order to fill this in, you need to have a conversation with the person's mortgage broker. You know, if we were working with Everett, you would call up Everett and say, Everett, I'm putting in a contract for Sally Ponchak. How quickly do you think you can actually get her a mortgage commitment? A mortgage commitment means that all the questions have been answered and all the contingencies of the mortgage have been met. And so he's going to tell you, well, you know, I think it'll take me 2 weeks, in which case you would figure 2 weeks and you would put the 28th. Or maybe he's going to say, well, you know what, this person is in business for themselves, so it's going to take a little longer. You better give me a month. So then you're going to put whatever date that is. But don't just make up a date. You know, check with the mortgage company if you can, because what a mortgage commitment date means is that technically, if you have this date, in this case November 11th, and your clients do not have a mortgage by November 11th, their commitment, they're in breach of the contract, and the seller could potentially cancel the contract because you are not abiding by the contract. So you want to make sure that date is doable for everybody.
Sally, what happens to the deposit if it doesn't come through?
You mean if one of the, like every contract has 3 contingencies. The first one is the attorney review. The second one is the inspections. And the third one is the mortgage. So if it falls apart during attorney review, no money will have passed hands at that point. But if it falls apart, maybe because of inspection issues, after it goes under contract, if it doesn't work because there's inspection issues that can't be resolved, the seller's attorney has to return the money to the buyers. Or if the buyers are whatever the reason, are unable to obtain a mortgage, they get their money back, as long as they've shown that they've made every effort to try to get the mortgage. So balance of purchase price is really when the closing is going to be. So payment of the balance of purchase price shall be made at the closing, and you're going to go in here and you're going to choose a date. And that will be according to what's ideal for your buyers, as well as what was negotiated with the seller. And notice this is something you should point out to your buyers. The balance of the purchase price, first of all, this is, I don't know why the state of New Jersey said paid in cash. We absolutely do not want cash for the closing of a house. It has to be a certified cashier's or trust account check. It has to be an official check. It cannot be a personal check. So you need to make sure your buyers understand that. Their attorney or title company will remind them, but that's really important. So they need to know that. Paragraph 4, sufficient assets. And by the way, I want you all to take the time someday, not right now, to literally read through this contract. Read every word of this contract. I know that's boring and not the most fun thing to do, but you really need to know what's in here. You're asking people to sign a very important document. And although many people will just blindly sign because you tell them sign wherever it indicates and they go and do it, but on occasion you're going to get people who say, tell me exactly what each paragraph here says. And if you've never read this, let me tell you, you're going to be a wreck trying to quickly read it and interpret it for them. So take the time to learn the contract and to know what each paragraph says. So sufficient assets just says that the buyer is representing by signing this, that between the mortgage and the money they're putting down, they have enough money to close on this house. Paragraph 5, accurate disclosure of selling price, is just saying by signing this, the buyer and seller are certifying that the price that's on this contract is the true price that the house is selling for, that there's no under the table or, backhanded deals going on. Paragraph 6, items included in sale. Now, if we go back to the listing again, there's a part on the listing. Unfortunately, it doesn't have anything listed here under items included, but sometimes you will see things here like maybe all appliances or swing set in backyard. You need to pay attention to that to see if there's something in particular that you want or that the buyers want included. Sometimes they might ask for something that wasn't technically included, or if there's any question about whether something should be included or not, you might want to put it in. For example, if they're expecting that all of the appliances will stay with the house, then you should write that in. Paragraph 7, items.
Hi, Sally.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. That's
No.
personal property, because personal property can be removed. How about like ceiling fans? Do you have to walk through and go through those items with
Okay,
your buyer?
so anything, the basic rule of thumb is anything that is fixed or attached to the wall or the ceiling is a part of the house and therefore should stay, unless it is specifically excluded by the seller. So sometimes you might look at a listing and it'll say, under excluded, it'll say dining room chandelier or draperies in the master bedroom. But if it's not specifically excluded, it's considered to be included if it's fixed or attached to the house. Obviously, anything personal, the seller is allowed to take. But if there's any question, I would ask the listing agent. There have been many fights in many houses over, but I thought the washer and dryer were included. A washer and dryer are not fixed or attached to the wall. They're just plugged in. So they're technically not included, whereas A stove is usually built in.
Yeah.
A stove is usually considered to be included.
Okay.
And in fact, if you read through this paragraph under items included, it will tell you a lot of things that should be included unless they're specifically excluded. So shades, blinds, they should automatically be included unless the seller says, I'm taking the shades in the living room. Okay, paragraph 8, dates and times for performance. Seller and buyer agree that all dates and times included in this contract are of the essence, which means that things should happen by that date or certainly within a few days of that date. Certificate of occupancy, paragraph number 9, that applies to the seller, and it just tells the seller that they have to get whatever their town is requiring. Most towns require some kind of certificate of occupancy on the part of the seller when a house is closing. Paragraph 10, municipal assessments. Municipal assessments are things where a town has come along and said, okay, we want everybody in the town to get a new sidewalk. And so if you have a sidewalk in front of your house, we're going to assess you X number of dollars for this sidewalk. And that is basically put as a lien against the house that the sellers are supposed to pay. So municipal assessments, the seller has to say, yes, I do have municipal assessments, or no, I don't. And if it turns out that they do have an assessment, then the discussion has to be, you know, is the seller going to pay it? Are they passing it on and expecting the buyer to do it? If they are, that needs to be disclosed to the buyer. So in most cases, there are very few times this pops up, but you should just be aware of it. Paragraph 11, quality and insurability of title. As you all know, at the closing, everybody gets the title to the property as well as the deed. And the title is the document that says that that certifies really that the property is free of all claims by anybody else. There's no money owed. The seller has the right to pay off any liens against the property at closing. So they can pay off their mortgage. Maybe they never finished paying for landscaping that they had done. They can pay that, but it all has to be paid off at closing. And the title search is for the purpose of finding out if there are any of these liens that need to get paid. And the reason you have title insurance, or the reason buyers always get title insurance when they're closing on a house, is that if somehow something pops up after they're already living in the house, someone comes out of the woodwork and says, wait a minute, there's an old tax bill of $3,000 that was never paid. We want our $3,000. The new homeowner would not have to pay that. Their title insurance would. Okay, number 12, possession, occupancy, and tenancies. Paragraph A just says that once the closing has taken place, the buyer has the right to move into the house and start using it as their own house. Believe it or not, in some parts of the country, there can be a closing and the seller has a certain amount of time to get out. The buyer can't necessarily move in. But in New Jersey, once the closing has taken place, it's the buyer's house. Paragraph B is just if there are tenants living in the house, that has to be disclosed, both their name, if they live first floor, second floor, what their rent is, what is the security deposit they paid, and what is the term of the lease. Who remembers what you learned in real estate school? If there's a tenant living in a house that someone wants to buy, what's the
Comes with the property.
rule? Right. The lease goes with the property. So if your people want to buy a house and there's a tenant in there who has a lease that runs until next July, your buyers have to be willing to let that person keep living there until next July. Okay, paragraph 13, lead-based paint. This is if you know the house was built before 1978, you're going to check off that it's applicable. If it was built after that, you'll check not applicable.
Question, Sally,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
That's
So
okay.
if they have a lease for, 6 more months, they can stay there. They don't have to move out, right?
Correct. I mean, they will probably have to move out at the end of the 6 months if that's what the new purchaser wants, but they have the right to stay there for
Stay
that
there no matter what. Okay.
no matter what. Yep.
Question,
Yes.
if it's a month to month, you have to give them, what was it?
Month to month, if it's month to month, the seller should have given the people notice that the closing was happening and that they had a certain amount of time to get out. And if that did not happen and the new owners of the house want the renters out, they have to give them reasonable notice to vacate.
Now, can you put it in the contract that before you purchase the house, that they have to
You could,
leave?
yes, if you knew there were tenants in there on a month-to-month lease, you could say, this contract is contingent upon the tenants vacating the property before the closing. Sure, you can put that in. Okay, paragraph B, lead warning, just explains about lead paint and the dangers of it. I don't think we have to go into that. The next several paragraphs talk about inspections. And basically, the home inspection, the seller has to allow the buyers 10 days to bring in someone to inspect the property. And the buyer can hire whomever they want, but it has to be someone who is a licensed, certified home inspector in the state of New Jersey. It can't be Uncle Henry who knows a lot about houses or a builder friend that they have. It can't be. That doesn't count. It has to be someone who is licensed, certified, has insurance. That's the only kind of inspector you can have. And so it's always at the buyer's expense, and they have 10 days after the attorney review to do it.
Sally, who coordinates all this? Would this be the agent?
Well, the agent kind of facilitates it. I mean, the buyers are going to pay for their home inspectors and they're going to make the arrangements, but what is always a good idea is if you ask the buyers, when do you think you want to do the home inspection? And then you call the listing agent and say, hey, do you think your sellers would be okay with the buyers doing their home inspection, next Thursday, next Saturday, whatever the date is. Obviously, the sellers have to agree as to when the inspector is coming. And we do recommend that the buyers attend the home inspection because not only is the home inspector there to look for problems, but also to really teach them a little bit about the house, that they can learn, hey, this is where your water shutoff valve is. If you ever need to shut off all the water to your house, this is where you do it. Or teach them about how to use the thermostats or, the built-in vacuum cleaner if they never had a built-in vacuum cleaner and the house has one. So it really is a good experience. And I believe that you as the buyer agent should also be there. Partly to help everybody keep things in perspective. Before the home inspection, you want to have a little talk with your buyers and explain to them that the purpose of the home inspection is to look for major problems, not little like, oh, I think that doorknob is loose, big things, you know, maybe a structural issue, you know, a termite issue, the heating system isn't working or the air is not working, those kind of things, not the little minutia kind of things that you could fix for, you know, $10.
Sally,
Okay,
so I have a question.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Going back to Roddy's point about responsibility of the agent, the certificate of occupancy, is that responsibility of the agent?
No, that's the
Seller's agent?
responsibility of the seller.
Oh, okay, so that's a
It's
seller's
the
agent.
responsibility of the agent to remind the seller to do it, and once in a while, if the seller has already moved out, you know, to somewhere far away, the agent will end up having to do it. I did many of them over the years, but basically it's up to the seller. They pay for it and they arrange it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sally, is there a checklist available that kind of lists all these items?
Lists like what you should
The
be
inspection?
telling people.
Yes, right, exactly.
I'll see what I can find. I think there probably is, yes.
That'd be great,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, we're up to paragraph 14, point of entry systems. We really don't have them in this area, so I don't think we need to even go into that. Now we come to the really fun part. Cesspools and septic tanks, the topic everybody always wants to talk about. Not really. First of all, do you know the difference between a cesspool and a septic?
Septic is a
Anybody?
tank,
Okay.
physical tank. I'm not sure about a cesspool. Like, I would imagine it's just. an
Okay,
exit
so
Cesspool's
the
a field.
cesspool,
It's a built
the
field.
cesspool was the precursor to the septic. And what a cesspool is, well, first of all, backtracking, we all know that every house has waste that comes out, right? They call it gray water, which is like the water from your sinks and your bathtub and your washing machine, and black water, which is the waste that comes out from your toilets. And so in the old days, before there were sewer systems, which, you know, most towns have sewers, but there's still some remaining places that have cesspool or septic. So in the old days, before septic systems or sewers, there was a pipe that led out from the house, and it basically just went into an area. Sometimes there was some kind of a tank, but a lot of times it just flowed into the ground, and that was your cesspool. Later, it was discovered that that wasn't really too great and not a wonderful way to get rid of the waste. And so they came up with the concept of a septic system. So in a septic system, the water still comes out the pipe, but it flows into a tank. And the tank is perforated. And the idea of the tank is the water will flow out both through the perforations in the tank, as well as there are pipes that lead out from the tank into what's called the septic field. And if you've ever seen a septic field being constructed, you would think that somebody was putting in a football field in their yard. They're quite large, and there's usually a whole network of pipes, and that the idea of it is to disperse the liquid, not all in one place, but in different places, because the earth, the soil, is a natural purifier of water. So it lets the earth do the work of purifying the water. And that the solid waste remains in the tank. And every so often, every 3 to 5 years, the people have to have a septic company come and pump out the tank. So that's the difference. Cesspools are no longer legal in New Jersey. So if anyone has a cesspool, it has to be changed to a septic system, or if there's sewer available, the people can hook up to a sewer. So one of the inspections you're going to have, if they don't have sewer, is you're going to have a septic inspection, and you're going to have someone come and they're going to determine, number one, if it's a septic or a cesspool, and number two, if the septic is in working order. So that's an important part because it's very expensive to put in a new septic system. They can run anywhere from $20,000 up to $60,000 or even $70,000 if there's a difficulty, like they have to blast through rock or something like that. So you definitely, for the sake of your buyers, want to be sure that there's a good working system of some type in this house. So you'll see here under Cesspool Requirements, there's two paragraphs, and you're supposed to check one or the other. And the seller is supposed to say if they have a cesspool or not, but honestly, many sellers, if they haven't lived in the house that long, they just assume they have a septic system. And then sometimes it turns out that they don't, that they have a cesspool. But this just says if this box is checked, the seller agrees that the seller will abandon and replace any and all cesspools located on the property. Or paragraph 2 is the buyer agrees that the buyer will take all those actions and replace it. Now, you might say, like, why on earth would any buyer even want to say that they would do that? There is a certain type of buyer that would, and that is a builder who's maybe going to add on to the house and is going to need a new septic system anyway. A builder might say, yeah, I'll take that on. I'll take care of the septic. But in most cases, you're going to check that you want the seller to take care of it. Inspection contingency clause, paragraph 16. Basically, this is saying that the buyer and seller acknowledge that the purchase of a home is a big investment, and the realtors are not qualified to tell you if a house is in good shape or not in good shape. We know a little bit about homes, but we are not experts in terms of the systems and the structure of the home. And so we recommend that a home inspector be brought in. Usually part of the home inspection is that they will check the structure, the systems, the appliances. They will check the roof, air conditioning, heating. If there's a pool, you can hire a pool company to inspect that. Most home inspectors will also check for pest infestation, and pests meaning wood destroying insects, meaning termites or carpenter ants. If the people are getting a mortgage, the mortgage company will require what they call a clean pest form, which just certifies that the house is free of termites and carpenter ants. Because the mortgage company doesn't want to pay the money to buy a house that is getting eaten alive by some kind of bug. So that will be required. Most home inspectors will do a radon test. Radon, if you remember from real estate school, is a colorless, odorless gas that has been found potentially to cause cancer in some people. So there is a test that can be done. And the rule of thumb is that the radon is measured in something called picocuries, and the reading has to be under 4 to be safe. Anything over that, the seller will be asked to fix, to remediate. And actually, remediation of radon is pretty simple. You can do it for about maybe $1,200 to $1,500. It just really involves a fan that brings air circulation into the area that has radon. This just talks about the wood-boring insects. We mentioned that. This paragraph D is just that the buyer acknowledges that the property is being sold in as-is condition. But the purpose of the home inspection is to look at things that maybe you can't see immediately with the naked eye. I will tell you, if you're showing a house where the driveway is a total wreck, it's just all broken apart and in horrible, horrible shape, or you look at a roof and the roof has obviously holes or shingles missing, the buyer is supposed to take that into account when they make their offer. They can't go back after home inspection to a homeowner and say, oh, the homeowner, the home inspector said that your driveway is a mess, we want a new driveway. Their answer to you is going to be, you saw the driveway, you should have made your offer based on whatever it is you want to do with the driveway. So things that are very obvious and visible are not things that you should be asking for in a home inspection. You should be taking them into account in the offer that you make. Okay, so let's say now the home inspector has finished and given his report to the buyers, and there's a few things that the buyers feel they want to ask for. So let's say that they have 6 things, A, B, C, D, E, and F, that they want fixed. The buyer's attorney will write a letter to the seller's attorney saying, we had the home inspection and the items that we would like fixed are A, B, C, D, E, and F. And at that point, the seller has 7 business days to get back to the buyer's attorney and say, okay, we'll fix none of it, we'll fix all of it, or some combination like we'll fix A, B, and C, but not the rest. At that point, it becomes a negotiation, and technically, if they refuse to fix everything, that is grounds for the buyer to walk away. But that rarely happens. There usually is something that can be worked out, some middle ground that can be arrived at. So that should always be your goal as the agent, to see if something can be negotiated that will make everybody happy. Okay, we're up to paragraph F, line 371, flood hazard area. Typically, the buyer's attorney will do what's called a flood search or a flood certification, because if a property is in a flood zone, a mortgage lender might require mortgage flood insurance in order for them to grant a mortgage to the people. So if you ever have a suspicion that a house is in the flood zone, you can always contact Brian Allen, who is our Carnegie Title representative, and he will, for free, run a flood certification report for you. So keep that in mind.
Sorry, what was his name?
Brian Allen from Carnegie Title. Let's see. We already talked about qualifications of inspectors. They have to be licensed and certified. Megan's Law. This is an interesting one. Does everybody know what Megan's Law is?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, what is it regarding?
Sexual predators.
Sexual predators, correct. Okay, so the idea of Megan's Law Registry is that people have a way to find out if there's a sexual predator living in a neighborhood. Here's where it gets interesting in terms of you as a realtor. Even if you know for an absolute fact that there is a sexual predator living on a street where you have people looking to buy a house, believe it or not, you cannot tell them. You cannot tell that to the buyers. Why? I don't know. It seems contrary to the spirit of the law, but we are not allowed to tell people. So what we can do is there is a website here under Megan's Law Registry. We can direct people, if they're concerned about it, to look at this registry, and that will tell them. You cannot do it for them. They have to do it. Okay, paragraph 19, notification regarding off-site conditions. So off-site conditions are things that could affect the value of a property, but that are not readily noticeable. For example, an off-site condition might be you are hoping to sell a house that has like a big expanse of woods behind it. And oh, that looks so beautiful, all this wonderful privacy. But there could be an off-site condition. Like maybe it's wooded because at one time there was a toxic dump back there. Or maybe there are plans to put a shopping center in that woods, but there's nothing happening yet. So the reason this notification is in there is to just say that a buyer should probably call the town if there's any question and just say, you know, I'm thinking of buying a house at 46 Country Club Lane in Tenafly. Can you tell me, is there anything going on around there that I should be aware of? And that's what off-site conditions are. The next one, air safety and zoning notice. This concerns airport safety. This one is also a little bit almost a joke for people like us because it lists all of these airports, but there's a couple airports that are sort of exempt from this, and guess which ones they are? They are
Teterboro.
Newark Airport, Teterboro Airport,
Stewart.
Little Ferry Seaplane Base. So these are the airports that most affect our area, but they're not covered under this Airport Safety and Zoning Act. So anyway, what can we do? Bulk law, bulk sales does not apply to your typical residential, so we're not going to get into that today. Notice to buyer concerning insurance. So insurance is something that every buyer should be buying for their home that they're purchasing, because once they buy it, they're responsible for it. So, you know, God forbid, but the day they move in, a bolt of lightning strikes the house and it burns down, it's their responsibility. They can't go back to the seller and say, well, wait, I bought this house from you and now it burned down. You have to rebuild it. No. Once the closing happens, it's their house and it's their problem. So they need to be sure, and a mortgage company will require this, they need to have a mortgage policy that is in place for the second that they have taken possession of that home. So that has to be arranged in advance. And that's where we recommend that letter that I showed you when we were going through Dot Loop, that you can refer somebody to Carnegie Home and Auto. And most people appreciate knowing. The way Carnegie Home and Auto works is they are a mortgage broker, an insurance broker, which means that they have access to, I think it's like 10 to 15 different companies. So they would get the information on the house that the buyers want to buy. They would submit it to all of these different companies and then come back to the buyers with the best policy for their situation. I can tell you that people have been really happy with them, so I would highly recommend that you send that email. Paragraph 23, maintenance and condition of the property. The seller has a responsibility from the moment you put the contract in until the closing to continue to maintain the house. They can't just say, okay, I have a buyer, I'm going to stop mowing the lawn, I'm not going to take care of the house. They have an obligation to continue to take care of the house. Risk of loss, meaning if anything happens to the property by fire or otherwise, it is the responsibility of the seller right up until the moment of closing. Once it closes, then it's your problem or the buyer's problem. Paragraph 25, initial and final walkthroughs. In addition to the inspection set forth in the contract, the seller also has to allow the buyer to come back into the house right before the closing, either day of, day or two before, depending on everybody's schedules, to look at the house. It's ideal to go close to the closing because a seller is supposed to be totally moved out and have the house be what they call broom clean, which doesn't mean every little speck of everything is cleaned up, but basically cleaned up. And the purpose of the walkthrough for the buyer is, number one, to make sure that the seller has moved out. Number two, to make sure that when they moved out, the moving company didn't bash a hole in the wall, or the seller didn't decide to leave 25 cans of old paint sitting in the garage that the buyer would then have to get rid of. So you're going to go and you do your walkthrough. If you notice something that's not right, like let's say that the homeowner, the seller, agreed to leave the washer and dryer, and you get there and the washer and dryer are gone. What you're going to do is immediately call the buyer's attorney and say, we're at the walkthrough and here's what the problem is, so that the attorney can start negotiating how that's going to be handled with the seller's attorney.
So you're saying you contact the seller's attorney, you don't contact the buyer's attorney? That's not litigation between
the buyers would contact their attorney to say,
sorry.
yeah, that something was wrong when you did the walkthrough. Yeah. Okay, adjustments at closing. The seller has the right to make any adjustments at closing. They have the right to pay off any debts that they have, and the attorneys will work things out, such as, let's say the house is closing
Okay, I have
on
an
November.
appointment tomorrow at 1:15. Do you want it?
Who,
All right.
can you put
So
yourself
they're gonna
on?
call you at this number.
You need to go on mute.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So let's say that the seller has paid their taxes through the end of the year, but you're closing November 1st. The attorney is going to figure out what the taxes are per diem and bill the buyer for the amount of tax to reimburse the seller for the amount of taxes that they paid beyond what the closing date is. So that can all be done by the attorneys at the closing. Paragraph 27, failure of buyer or seller to close. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I've only known of one instance where that happened, where it just, the buyer was suddenly nowhere to be found. But for the most part, closings happen. But if they don't, just know that whoever, was ready to close has the right to sue the person who doesn't close. 28, Consumer Information Statement Acknowledgement. By signing below, the seller and the buyer acknowledge they received the Consumer Information Statement on New Jersey relationships prior to the it's supposed to say, it says to the first showing of the property. So that's why I say you really should do that Consumer Information Statement early on. So in this line, you're going to put the name of your company and then your name. And you're going to say is operating as, we said in this case, it would be a disclosed dual agent because they have both sides. And then if more than one firm, let's say it wasn't dual agency, and so it was some other company, you would put in the other company's name in this paragraph B. Broker's information. This is pretty self-explanatory. You're just going to start filling this information in. If you need to find out what somebody's real estate license ID is, you can find it right in the roster of the MLS. You just have to go into the roster of the MLS and you'll see it there. But the idea of this is just to put in as much information as you can. Put in what your commission is that you should be getting, and that's that. Equitable lien, this is just a paragraph that says, and attorneys always cross this out, so I don't even know why it's in here, but it just says that our commission is a lien against the property. It has to be paid. Paragraph 32, if the buyer or the seller also holds a real estate license, it has to be disclosed here. Paragraph 33 just asks that the realtors receive a copy of the closing disclosure, the closing statement. Paragraph 34, this is important, professional referrals. The seller and the buyer might request names of attorneys, inspectors, vendors who, do certain things like, a name of an electrician or a roofer or something like that. This is just saying that to cover you, really, that you can't be held responsible if it doesn't work out. But what I would say to you is this. If you have buyers or sellers who ask you to recommend some type of person, whether it's an attorney, a home inspector, a mortgage person, always recommend more than one and tell them you want them to do their due diligence and decide. Because if you tell a buyer or a seller, like, you need to use this home inspector is the best, and that home inspector does the home inspection and misses something, they're going to blame you. So make the decision as to who they're going to use, the buyer or seller's decision. Don't be telling them, oh, this is the only person you should use. Always give them choices and tell them they have to choose. Okay, paragraph 35. We're coming down the home stretch here. Attorney review clause. You learned about this in real estate school. Attorney review is a 3 business day period. We don't count weekends. We don't count holidays. You count the days from the date of delivery of the signed contract to the buyer and the seller. You do not count Saturdays, Sundays, or legal holidays. The buyer and the seller may agree in writing to extend the 3-day period for attorney review. Sometimes an attorney will ask for more time. Know that when an attorney gets a contract, the buyer's attorney will almost certainly send a letter to the seller's attorney that starts with, I disapprove the contract. They have to say that, okay? But what they usually go on to say is, However, I would approve the contract with the following modifications, and they write in, you know, whatever they think has to be modified. But things need to be in writing. Okay, notices. This is just saying that email, fax, electronic, all are considered acceptable. Paragraph 37, no assignment. No assignment means that the buyer can't suddenly say to his, you know, cousin Billy, oh, cousin Billy, do you want to buy this house instead of me? Oh, you do? Okay, we'll just switch out your name and you'll be the buyer. Can't do that, not without the seller's permission. Paragraph 38 just says electronic signatures and documents are fine. 39, corporate resolutions. If the buyer or seller is a corporation, you really need to have paperwork that proves that they do have the right to do whatever they're doing. Paragraph 40 just says this is the whole contract. There's nothing under the table, nothing else going on. 41, applicable laws, just says that the contract is governed by the laws of the state of New Jersey and any local laws. Addenda. So these are extra documents that potentially you might have to use. So if any of these things apply to the house or the buyers that you are selling, you need to do the appropriate addenda. So if you have buyers who have a house to sell, you've got to do the buyer property sale contingency. If you're selling a condominium, you have to fill out this form. If they're getting an FHA or a VA loan, you need to fill out this one. So just look through, and if any of them apply to your particular situation, then you need to use it. Additional contractual provisions are just if there's something extra that your buyers want to write in, such as buyers request that the swing set in the backyard be removed before closing, or buyers request that the closing date can be extended if all parties agree. Anything that's outside of what already has been put in the contract can be put in additional contractual provisions. A lot of times you won't have any. This will just be left blank, and that's fine. And then we finally get to the place where everybody signs. Remember, on each page, you're having them initial too. But this is where they sign. If you're actually with them and you want to witness it, you can, but not necessary. Okay, that's the whole contract. But wait, there's more. We have the wire fraud notice. So does anybody know what wire fraud is?
Yeah, I think in another class I came to know that some people just wired the money without getting the email from the mortgage company directly, and actually it was a fraud and their money was never recovered, and it was a mess.
Right. So this has become more and more of a problem. You know, wire fraud is when you're transferring money electronically. And you need to discuss this with your buyers and sellers because this has become a problem. And we've had a few instances, some of which we've been able to nip in the bud before they actually go bad. But one of them we didn't know about until it was too late. And I'll just tell you a couple stories. So the one that was the worst one is one of our agents had sold his listing. He actually sold it himself. The people buying it were paying cash. They got a letter that they thought was from an email, I should say, that they thought was from their attorney. Because what these wire fraud people do is somehow they managed to hack into people's emails, and they got the buyer's attorney's actual email. But you know how there's a little string of numbers and letters in emails? Maybe you never even noticed them, but all of them have this little string that kind of directs where things are going. They sent, these wire fraud people sent what the buyer thought was an email from her attorney telling her to wire literally, I think it was $400,000 to him, supposedly. She never checked with the attorney to say, did you actually send this to me? Should I be wiring this money? She never checked. She just did it. It came almost the day before the closing. Her attorney calls her up and says, I'm calling to tell you how much money to bring for the closing tomorrow. And the buyer said, what are you talking about? You know, you already asked me for the money. I wired it to you. And the attorney said, no, I never asked you for the money, and I never got the money. That money is gone, never to be found again. You can't even track down these things. So we need to warn people about this. We had one good story where someone had gotten a letter, an email that they thought was from their attorney asking them to wire a certain amount of money. And they thought it seemed a little weird, so they called our agent that they were working with and said, can you just check with our attorney because I don't feel like this is the right amount of money. And our agent called the buyer's attorney, who immediately said, I never sent them an email asking for money. So that one we were able to stop before something bad happened. So the purpose of this is to just tell people that there is wire fraud out there. Before they wire funds to anyone, they need to call the person and actually have a conversation with them on the phone, confirming that the email did come from that person and that they indeed are supposed to send the money. So hopefully that will avoid problems.
I would expect
Okay,
that going with the check would be safer then.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said I would expect then that going with the check, just a cashier's check, would be the safest.
The cashier's check is the safest, yes, yes. But there are certain situations, you know, maybe the buyer is out of the country on business or, you know, who knows. But there are situations where it's necessary, but I'm with you. I'm old school. I'd rather just have a certified check. Okay, this is the other critical document, and this one carries a really huge fine if you don't have it. It's a $40,000 fine if this is not in the file. So this is called the Affiliated Business Arrangement Disclosure Notice. As you know, our company has a relationship with both a title company and an insurance company, Carnegie Title and Carnegie Home and Auto. We have to, by law, disclose that to our buyers. And that's what this is, a disclosure. It's not requiring them to work with either of those parties. It's simply a disclosure. And you're going to fill in their name up here, the buyer's name, and the date, whatever date you're filling this out, and then your name as the sales associate, and then all these other boxes, and I'm sorry about this for whatever the reason, you have to keep filling in your name. I think it's 7 times. So all of these will have your name. The only one that doesn't have your name is this, which is the buyer's name and the date. But all the other ones will be your name filled in. And then you're going to have the buyer sign. And I think we have come to the end. Who has a question? I know that was a lot to take in.
That's a lot. It's scary when you mention fines. So Sally, when we go through this, is this reviewed by anybody at the office?
You know what, if you, for your first couple, before you feel confident, certainly you could call, you're in coaching, you could call Catherine or Mary Beth, or you could reach out to me. And, I think any of us would be happy to look it over for you. And also, Catherine, if you're in coaching, in Ridgewood anyway, is available to help you write up your first listing or your first contract. That's one of the services of the coaching program.
Got it. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. It's good to know.
Yeah, yeah. So it is a
I
lot.
have one question.
This session was recorded, and it will be on YouTube. When you go into YouTube, you search Bergen County Partners, and you'll see a whole bunch of videos on there. So if you ever feel like, it's 11 o'clock on Saturday night and you're writing up a contract, what did Sally say about that? You can go and look on the video.
Okay.
Oh, Sally, this is a buyer's contract. This is, when it's been, I guess, an offer. Would this be the same as an offer?
Yeah, the offer is the contract.
Okay, so it's one and the same.
You're making an offer with the contract.
Question. Hey, Sally,
Yeah.
one quick. So say the
I'm going to stop my screen share. Just wait 1 second.
Okay.
Because I want to see your faces.
And I put it on
Okay.
video because, all right, say so the offer is rejected. Then you show your seller another property. Do you start a new loop, or do you archive this contract and start a new contract? Or is it?
It's a good idea to start a new loop
Okay.
for each property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah.
Sally, the affiliate
Yeah.
business arrangement disclosure, do we give that along with the contract, or at the beginning when we have all the CIS?
You can do that with the contract.
Okay.
Yeah. The contract, the wire fraud, and the affiliated business disclosure are actually all bundled together on .loop. So you have to do them all at the same time. Yeah. Yeah.
Sally, with the market being the way it is, how quickly do you need to get this contract in, this offer in?
Well, if you know there's other offers, fast. I mean, time, when it comes to writing a contract, time is always of the essence because you never know how many other people might be making an offer. So, always a good idea to do it right away.
Got it.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of being able to do it electronically, because sometimes you may have shown houses over the weekend and your buyers say, you know what, we want to go home and just think about it. And all of a sudden, Monday morning, they call you up and say, Roddy, we want to buy that house at 46 Country Club. And now you've got to spring into action and, pull all this stuff together.
Right. Sally, to that point, would you create a template, like kind of pre-fill in all your information so it's ready to go, and all you have to do is drop in the property and the price and all that, so that you could be really quick on it and save it in .loop or something? Is that a good idea, or is that just?
Well, I mean, there's a few forms, I guess, that you could do that with, but for example, the contract, that's tailored to each person. So you're going to have to go through that with each buyer.
Yeah, no, I mean, like if I could set up a .loop for each buyer, right, and just kind of leave all the details of the property out, but just have that ready for me, have it with me, have it ready, and if they want to, that day, we've got the contract already written out, we just have to fill in a couple of things and let's go. Would you do that?
I mean, you could do that for sure.
Would you do that?
I mean, there was a period of time before electronic was a possibility, when those of us who are old like me, everything was done on paper. And so we always would carry contracts in our car. We'd be like writing the contract on the hood of our car.
Right.
And the people would be signing it right there when the market was crazy.
Uh-huh.
So once you've done a few, it's not really hard. I mean, today I'm sure it seemed overwhelming to many
Yeah,
of
it
you.
did.
But once you've done a few, I mean, I'll tell you, you could fill one of these out in no time.
And doesn't it auto-populate if you have, you already have the person's name, address, and phone
If you
number?
have the people's names in, yes, a lot will auto-populate.
So if they're already in .loop and you start to do a contract, it'll automatically start populating the information?
Well, remember when we were going through the documents in .loop, when we got to the loop, we went down to the bottom and it said people, so you could add in your people. Yeah, in advance. Did I answer everybody's question? Did you all get
Everett's
the
contact?
mortgage information?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, and Sally, you'll see if you could come up with a checklist for the buyer?
Yes. You mean like what to do from contract to closing?
Yeah, pretty much. Here's what the buyer needs to, you know, the inspection, attorney.
Right. Okay. Yes, I definitely can. If anybody else wants that, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Send me an email and I'll be happy to send it to all of you. One thing I would recommend to you, I know in Ridgewood and probably in all of your market centers, those of you who are in different market centers, you must have somewhere in your market center printed copies of these documents. In Ridgewood, we have them in the, yay, excellent. In Ridgewood, we have them in the reception area. And I would recommend that you pick up one or two of these packets. They're all stapled together, like all the documents you would need, and practice. Pretend you're going to buy your own house or pick out a house in the MLS and start writing up a contract, just so you get the feel of what it's like and what goes where. And that way, too, if you get stuck or you have a question, you'll be able to call one of us and ask or go back and review the video.
Hey, Sally?
Yeah.
You mentioned one time grab and go folders. Is that still something?
Yeah, I think we now have them in reception, but double check with Claire on that. Yeah. I see some of you are putting your email in the chat, but I really need you to send it to my email, because as soon as we end this, all those are going to disappear and I won't have them. So please send it to sallyponchak@gmail.com with your name and your email, so that, then I'll send it to you. Okay? I can't copy down all these emails.
What exactly is you sending in the email?
You're sending me your email if you would like to receive the checklist of the tasks that you will need to do from the time you write the contract to the closing.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay, so Sally Ponchak, SallyPonchak. You see my name under my picture, but all one word, @gmail.com. And I'll be happy to send that to you.
Really fun.
All right. If there's no other questions, I thank you all for coming. This was a long one. Thanks for hanging in with me.
Great info.
And it's important. It's really important. Friday, we have a new one for you, which is how to do the best open house ever. So come to that, because open houses should be gold for you. That should be where you're going to pick up clients, both buyers and sellers, because a lot of potential sellers go to open houses to kind of secretly check out realtors and decide who they want to work with. I think I mentioned this in Monday's class. Always think of an open house, every person who comes in, as a job interviewer, that you're potentially interviewing to become their buyer agent or their listing agent.
Yep.
So I'm going to tell you the things that you need to do to prepare in advance, what to do while you're there, and how to follow up, so that you can maximize the return you get from open houses. If you get good at doing open houses, that can be a huge source of business for you.
That would be great, Sally. I need that. I've been to a couple of open houses co-hosting it, but usually people walk in with like either they have agents or whatever, and so I don't know how to go about asking them how to follow up and.
Right. Well, there's always going to be a percentage, sometimes a large percentage, of people who come to an open house who are working with an agent, and we just have to accept that. But the ones we're looking for are the ones who are unattached. So, and there's usually at least a couple of those. If you get one good one from an open house, that's a great day. So, I'm going to teach you how to maximize your chances of that happening. And I will look forward to seeing you all on Friday.
You then. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Thanks, Sally.
What time is that on Friday?
Same, 1 o'clock.
Okay, thank you so much, Sally.
Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye.